Today we're going to talk about CRMs, why when you're doing PPC, when you get phone calls, you should be piping that data directly into your CRM because it will affect 2 to 3x how much more or less money you're going to make from that PPC campaign over time. If you did not know it already or you haven't seen any of my other videos of my rants, half the value of what you're getting from PPC when you start out, particularly, or should I say especially, is not getting sales, it's figuring out what doesn't produce sales. Because if you have the right tracking set up, Google and Facebook, actually, of course, and Bing or anything else really, will tell you exactly what does not work and what does work, and not just what does it work or does it not, but how much does it work? How much should you be spending on to attract a male versus a female, a mobile device user versus a desktop user, somebody from one zip code over another or one state over another if you're a national player makes a difference, and so on and so forth. And you basically, if you sell anything over $100, the amount of money, we'll just say, you're losing by not having call data being first of all just tracked at all, and B, of course, assuming that you allow phone calls, which if you sell anything over $100, you're going to lose half your money just from, or can make twice as much just by having a phone number available, so that they trust you more. They know they can, i.e., track you down if they have a problem. They won't do business with people who won't put a phone number on their site, whether you like it or not. But another 2 to 3x, of course, on top of that, if you don't utilize your phone data that's possible when running PPC campaigns through the power and magic of technology, you could pick up when they call what was their keyword, what was their device that they were on, what was the gender, the age, time of the day of the week, zip code, state, income level of the user, so you could dial in your ads, get better results that you could have otherwise. Just respectively, the 80-20 rule applies at PPC. 20% of your account at any time is going to produce 80% of its profits. If you don't know how to find the 80%, you're going to lose 2 to 3 times the amount of profit out of your whatever you're investing into ads in general by not using the full advantage of what's available to you with PPC and what these ad networks provide to you, which is a way to feed data into your ad accounts, not just from contact forms as they're filled out, but and not just if somebody buys through a shopping cart, but also when somebody calls. Just if you're selling product and you have an e-commerce site, just importing information about calls, by the way, or excuse me, shopping cart orders. If you sell something over $100, you're also losing, like 2 to 3x of the potential that you have for your company. Because why? Because a lot of people call and they don't buy for a while, and that's missing data that's going to contribute to a loss in money because you have a less clear picture and less data to work from. The more data you have about what doesn't work, the more you can focus on what does work. So the stuff that works above average, you can double, triple down on it, and the stuff that doesn't work as average, you could decide to spend less on it, which is what PPC should be about if you want to be the dominant player in your niche, for sure. Why? And the reason for that is because 90% of people plus in your market, I don't care if you're selling mortgages, and being a competitive market like this, 90% of people won't be tracking whether the things like I'm showing you here, where when somebody calls, what was all the what I call metadata, all the information about that user. Did they buy? Did they not buy? And then being able to figure out those type of users. Should you focus on them in the future? Not so much if, but how much. When you have data flowing into your account, it's not a matter of if you're going to get results, it's just when. And are you going to make a profit? When is it going to happen? You're trying to make it as quick as possible, because everything after that is just a downhill slide. You're just reinvesting part of the profits to grow the account. So we want to get profitable as quickly as possible because we don't want to obviously have to have too much money to get the ball rolling. But if you are not going to use all your data and set your systems up before you start, including your phone calls as leads are coming in, or in general as phone calls coming in, you're not going to get there as quick, and you're not going to make much money overall in your of what available, market share or pie that's available in your market of people actively searching for your product or service if you don't have the phone data as well. So respectively, even if they order on through your shopping cart and they order through your shopping cart anyway, it's still going to be the same kind of factor, because a lot of people, like I said, they call, they don't buy for a while. You can feed into your account, when they buy and did they call at all into your account, and use that to improve your ads and get the overall best result that you want. Get that extra 2 or 3x potential from your account, obviously, and also by doing so. So anyway, how and why to link the calls that are being generated from your PPC campaign traffic to your Salesforce. Maybe you're working with Zoho CRM or any other CRM. What the key importance is to get that 2 to 3x increase in results. Actually, how to do it. Also, results that I'm going to give you for several different markets where I've done this before and after. Clients don't do it. We come in and do it after, and why they got those results as much as they did. Where, like I said, 2 to 3 times the amount of increase in results, very, very typical from this. I've got 3 different market examples for you here as well. So anyway, with all that said, let's get into the actual meat of how to do this, and I'll give you those examples at the end so you understand and walk away from this video with an actual money-making strategy that you could start using today. If you're wondering, by the way, why I'm using a headset, as mentioned on my last video, my lapel mic just decided to get up and walk away. So I don't know where it went, but I wanted to make sure the audio quality on these videos are still good. If you have a CRM system already and are doing PPC, you're wasting at least half or more, like I said, of your PPC profit by not having phone calls from people who click on your PPC ads and go to your site to optimize your campaign, in which you actually could set everything up to feed in real time, which you want to do. You don't want to. You can get, if you have a CRM, you can obviously you can import information. There's a way to import information about the caller into your CRM, and then get that information into your ad account, whether Google or Facebook, manually. But there's also a automated way, which, yes, it's more of a pain, but it's worth it when you get it set up, because user errors out of there, and you're gonna, like going back to what I said before, you're gonna have the most accurate data to work from. The more data you have, the more detailed data you have about what worked and what didn't work, the more money you're basically, frankly, gonna make. Okay. So, and it doesn't matter actually what CRM you're actually using, or if, respectively, if you're not using a CRM, okay, and you have phone calls coming in, you should start using a CRM. Even if you have an e-commerce business, you should track the leads as they come in if you're selling something over $100, because if what you sell is over $100, whether product or service, of course, what they call the sales cycle window is longer, and the more expensive your product or service is, the longer the sales cycle window is, i.e. the time when somebody initially gets to your site to the time they buy. And you want to have information, you want to pick the information up about the user as they initially hit your site and show interest, so you can, when they eventually buy, at least you knew how they were initially interested in you, because all that matters is, that you got to be able to, when they buy, you got to be able to have the data. But if you don't get it right away when they first come in, so that you basically, when you buy, you can take that customer, pair it with the data that's captured up front, you're not going to be able to effectively do it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say there. But a CRM is the best way to capture when somebody calls to do it. I've mentioned on another video about CRMs and e-commerce companies that, so respectively, yes, you're an e-commerce, you should have a CRM so you can track the people, the phone call leads that come in, so that when these people buy, if you sometimes business customers, you can then tie the purchase that they made, which the big business customers that come in that end up buying 50 times more than the average individual consumer, having that data can be the make or break for your entire campaign when you look at the overall 1,000-foot level on it. And that it's particularly important that that data gets fed into your ad account to guide your ads on. Otherwise, respectively, you may not even make any money at all, but you're definitely going to lose half or more of your money, like I said, anyway, because there's certain keywords that will drive those mammoth orders from business customers, statistically more likely than others. It'll be 10 or 20% that are there. And if you can't see which ones they are, you can't take advantage of it. And a keyword is not on or off. You will show up maybe 50% of the time on a particular keyword that got you the mammoth orders if you don't know about this, whereas you could show up 100% of the time if you did know it, and you're not going to know, and it's not going to be obvious. You can only set your ads up so good using your basic mind logic. Then the data has to get you the rest of the way if you want to make the most money. But regarding the topic at hand, what I was going to say, if you have a CRM and you're an e-commerce company, you got a CRM, you can feed in orders. So if they call in and then they buy offline through the shopping cart on your site, you can have that data fed into your CRM, and it'll tie the sales that they did with the person that came in when they called. So when they called, that data gets captured. Then when they buy, that revenue data from the cart gets fed into that person's contact. And so then basically when you want to import information about that caller into your ad account, it comes with the how much they spent offline and without having to do anything. There's a way to obviously automate that. You could go inside your shopping cart, figure out who bought, match the name up with the CRM, punch it in manually. The more automated you set things up, obviously, if you know what you're doing, then the better, because there's less room for error or people forgetting. Whatever, things get fuzzy over time when you tell employees to do stuff. But and for people that, by the way, who take orders over the phone, even if it's 10% of your orders, you don't want to lose that data. It matters way more than you think. So not only you're trying to capture data about when they initially call in, whether that's about a question or whatnot, if they order offline or order and you take their credit card over the phone, you also obviously want to capture that data. And with that, it's the easiest way to keep track of it is through using a CRM. So I recommend using a CRM to organize your data from anything that, leads that come in through the phone, and then orders, of course, that come through the phone, through the system. And then, of course, if you're taking some orders through the phone and some orders through the shopping cart, you can have shopping cart data feed into your CRM. So if they buy through the phone there with you, that data will be there. If they buy from the cart, that data will be there. That's ultimately the Mac Daddy setup. If you're selling something over $100, for you to have the most data, which is going to result in you making way more money with your PPC campaigns. For lead generation companies, it just respectively obviously is they call, you want to capture their data, and then later on when they buy, that same lead is tracked in a CRM. You guys already that have service companies already know to use a CRM to track leads. And when they buy, eventually when you click deal 1, the information gets passed into Google or Facebook, so that you can see the data there. And actually Bing does it as well. And so you guys that are doing lead generation are used to doing this stuff. If you're not yet capturing the call data when it comes in, so that later on when they buy, you can feed data to your account, that's what this video is about. And if you're e-commerce, you should be acting like a lead generation business and use a CRM as well. So particularly for the bigger orders in general, or just the rest of the data that you can't capture now will start to get captured through using the CRM. In terms of this process, in order to get data from that occurs that you can pick up from a phone call as it comes in to your ad accounts, Google, Bing, Facebook, what happens is there's basically a 4-step process here. It's called, actually, if you want to, I have a great article on our site for offline conversion tracking that takes you through step by step in layman's terms, how to actually feed data from a call that comes in, even if you're not using a CRM, into your ad account, so you can use the filtering process to get you the 2 to 3x more profit from your exact same ad spend that you're spending now. Basically just get 3 times more orders from the same exact ad budget. There's more detailed information there, but in retrospect here, or in summary here, here's the process that happens. You understand kind of overall physically how this works. It's not just black magic stuff. So the first step is user calls. You got to have a call rail or call tracking program set up on your site. There's a bunch of them. I don't mess around with anything else besides call rail because it's the most reliable. You don't want to mess around with something that could be unreliable. And even if it's a tiny bit unreliable, you'll lose calls. You don't want that. Just use CallRail. Yes, it's $40 a month. They give you a piece of JavaScript code to put on your site, and then the site changes and puts a new number there on the site, on your website, as the website's downloaded on the user's browser, so that when they call the new tracking number, which gets forwarded over to your real number. It does that on your whole site, no matter how many numbers are on there. And so when they call, like I said, there's metadata, if you will, that's captured when the person calls. So if they later on they decide to buy 90 days later, because you've gotten all their data up front when they initially called, you will have all that data later on when you want that data, and you'll use it anyway, because what doesn't work is actually more important, like I said, than what does work. So you can know where to get budget to double down on stuff that works. Both of them are important, but that once you put that code on the site and you set up everything for CallRail, when somebody calls, what it's going to do, it's going to give you all that data about the user in CallRail, even though where the strategy here to get 2 to 3x more conversions doesn't come from the CallRail data itself. It captures what they call a Google Click ID or Bing Click ID, Microsoft Click ID for Bing, and for Facebook it's Facebook Click ID, which is basically a serial number that Google or Facebook or Bing assigns to every single user who clicks through their system. Yes, they track every user and exactly what they do, and they get a serial number for not every user, but every single session or time, basically, or event where somebody is clicking on an ad. Okay, every single ad click gets a serial number that could be referenced basically any point in the future, even though there's time limits in which they kind of will store the data. For like Google, it's like 90 days, for instance, but that code is picked up for you automatically using this CallRail software, and it's stored in the database. So you have something like a list of all your people who called through your website, and then there's a way that you can listen to the call recording if you want, and then a button you can click that has this serial number. That serial number is what gets imported into your Google, Bing, or Facebook account to tell you, which then that click ID can be Google stores or Bing or Facebook will store all the data it has on that particular ID. So when you tell Google, these are the exact IDs here that resulted in a sale, and this is how much they spent, it'll show you inside your ad account all the traits of that person, so you can refine your ads. They actually want you to do this because it makes their ads more relevant to the users, which makes people want to click on ads. So they give you this tool, and because nobody uses it, and because that can give you an edge, this can really be the one thing that gets your ads to work, whereas your competition doesn't work. But that's the first step. Step 2, what you do with this, because we're talking about CRMs and we want to automate this here, you set up a Zapier account. Now, if it's Salesforce, there's an automatic integration between CallRail and the Salesforce, or for your CRM. So this, going back here, there's a click ID that I mentioned, a serial number that gets picked up, with CallRail for you. That ID will get imported into your CRM now using Zapier. Unless you're using Salesforce, they have a direct integration. You don't need the Zapier software, but with Zapier, that user's information, when somebody calls, it'll right away set up a new lead inside your CRM system with the user's number, and then of course you have to enhance it with the user's name if the user's name isn't findable through the caller ID, and directory, white pages system. But the call would be there. It'll say XYZ number called for this many seconds or whatnot. And then click ID is this. So when later on, when you go ahead and you talk to the person, you've hung up the phone, you'll already see the record inside your CRM there. And then you'll just say, this person's interested, blah, blah, blah. Okay? But Zapier is how you get that data from CallRail, basically, with the actual serial number, which is the main thing you need there, into your CRM. And so that it's always there. And because it's already automatically there, you could tell your people, don't set up a new lead or contact inside your CRM. Look for the contact that's already there, so that there's as little chance for a mistake, like going back to what I said before, as possible. There's very little room for human error. That information stays with the record that you have that's automatically created through this Zapier software, and by importing CallRail data about the call to your CRM for the phone calls that you get through the site that are generated. Step 3, once the CRM has that data, that CRM is going to automatically post data to Google /Facebook /Bing, okay? Because they either have a direct integration system with these ad platforms, or you use the API. If you're using Salesforce for your CRM, they have a direct integration with Google. It's very easy. If you're using Zoho, there's almost a direct integration. Zoho has its own system, and there's a step-by-step process, and it says just put this code on your basically your site, and it'll directly integrate with Google as well, and it'll create a goal, if you will, so that and you can have it fire and tell Google when something happened that you want to track, when it happens itself. For other CRMs, you may have to use the API, but respectively, you want it to go directly into Google and Facebook and or Bing automatically, whereas Salesforce and Zoho, that integration, at least through Google, is automatic, okay? Because they have their own systems within Salesforce, within Zoho, to do that. So with that, basically what happens is because CallRail sets up a new lead in your CRM as soon as somebody calls, that lead keeps the click ID with that particular lead all the way until it reaches a deal, or when a deal is created, if a deal is created. And when somebody clicks deal 1 and they have the actual value of the deal into a separate field, that's the data that can be passed to Google and Facebook automatically once this is set up. And so then you can see right inside your account, this keyword generated, this deal 1, and it was for this amount, so I can tailor my ads with that. So you have to create the integration between CRM and Google and Facebook, though, in the beginning. And then basically from then on, when any phone call, any deal that originated from a phone call and came from a PPC ad phone call in specific, that eventually resulted in a one deal, that information then automatically gets posted to your ad account, so that eventually it piles up enough to where you can make really strong improvements to your ads. The last step as a part of this, though, to make sure you can do all that, is you have to set up goals, or what we call conversions, inside your ad account. So like, for instance, if we're doing Google here, I'm going to create a conversion I would always recommend doing a contact. So when somebody calls, have that data post. So just for the fact that they call, post that data. Why? Because it gives us data that we can start using right away, because there's going to be more of it. And then also post when you have a deal 1. Eventually it will just optimize off deal 1 data, because you have enough, a few hundred 1 deals from a PPC call that you can start doing that. You got to have a few hundred conversions to make a decent amount of, what they call statistical significance in your decisions, and how you're, doubling down on certain parts of your ads, and then doing less from certain other parts to keep walking your profit up and get you to the 2 to 3x. Respectively, Google or Salesforce automatically sets up those goals for you when you do the integration as a Zoho. You're going to have to do this your own self if you use another CRM and you're using the API to basically post data from your CRM to Google, okay? With all that said, and with all that, I'll say first as well, if you're a small business and you're doing PPC and you're going to pick a CRM, I would recommend Salesforce. It's worth it. Yes, it's more expensive, but it's way less trouble. So or Zoho, because it's how good the integration is between the CRM and these ad networks, Google, and it's easier to tie that data. You don't have to use an API to be able to do that, and a programmer to help you set up the what they call middleware, where the data from the CRM goes to some place and the database, which then that data then has to, or in other words, gets posted to your ad network, Google or Facebook or Bing. Now, like I said, you could do this manually, but if you leave it up to your employees, they'll definitely make mistakes eventually. We're all human. So, but the great thing with what I told you here, like I said, when somebody calls, they searched for carpet cleaning Dallas. They saw your ad. They got to your site. They saw the tracking number. They called, and right away when they called, your CRM has that particular person and all the relevant details right there in your CRM. Your staff can be trained so that when they get off the call, they look for the new contact that's auto-generated there based upon the number that shows up in the caller ID. They fill it in, and it stays there until they eventually buy. And when they buy, the data gets automatically posted to your Google Ads account, and there's no actual place for things to get screwed up. Okay. And so, like I said, the more data you have and the more accurate your data is, the more you're going to make. Just in general, if you do this the way that I said here and don't have any faults, 2 to 3x in terms of increase in profit on the same ad budget is pretty much a given. No matter what market you're in, as long as you sell something for more than $100, either a product or service, B2B or even B2C. Why B2C? Like I said, there's business customers that come in. There's really weird people that buy, a big order, and you got to have that missing data because it matters. Because that's the make or break for a lot of campaigns, like I said. While you're obviously at this, so most people, when you're talking about feeding data into a CRM and then feeding data from a CRM then into your ad account to guide your ads, they're talking about forms, but people have different, preferred methods of communication. Some people like chat, some people like calling, some people like forms. And if you're just getting your form data when somebody fills out the form into your CRM, you basically only have half the revenue there. The most interested people are going to want to call, right? The ones that are most interested right away. Not every market, but if you think about it, it makes sense. So they'll just set up the form integration so that all their form leads can be tracked, but they forget about calls because it seems complicated. It's not complicated, and that I just gave you the system, so there's no excuse why you can't do both. If it's my business, I want every single lead coming in, call and form fill both, and then if I have a cart purchase, all of that data feeding into my CRM so I can track each individual person, so I can have the maximum data to guide my ads, so I can get the most out of my ad spend, therefore make the most profit. So you could do the forms, and you do the phone calls, you do the forms. And then I mentioned before, you could do through your shopping cart. A lot of times, like with Shopify, there'll be a direct integration for Shopify to Salesforce or Shopify to Zoho CRM. If there's not, you can use the Zapier, and you'll be able to get that data for a mainstream cart into your CRM as well. So when somebody buys, it matches up the name on the shopping cart in the database there and the amount with the name. It'll search for the name inside the system if you're clever, or just create a new contact, right? And if it creates a new contact and you've already got another contact there, what you actually do, by the way, is you have somebody do maintenance where you merge contacts. So you find two people with the same name, and then you decide that this person who called and then later on bought through the site, it's actually the same person, and you merge the data. So you ultimately, you don't have the duplication or whatever there, and then basically when they called, then you have a more complete picture in general or whatnot. The Google Click ID or the serial number for the ad clicker, when they buy through the cart, there's a way to pick that up and also send that to your CRM as well. It's a little tricky, but it's also doable. Okay, it has to be captured, because where they get the serial number, by the way, is from the URL. If you click on an ad, you'll see like FB click ID equals or GCLID equals. When it gets picked up, it needs to be picked up before they buy, stored in a cache, and so when they buy, they have it. The same thing, by the way, happens for the phone calls. I mean, it's the same thing. They CallRail, the way that it picks up from the URL and then grabs it, and then if they call, it passes it to CallRail. If they don't call, it just gets rid of the information. The forms are the same way. With forms, it's done through a hidden form field, as they call it. So there's another field instead of like name, address, whatever, that says Google Click ID or whatnot, or Click ID, and it'll grab, when the form's submitted right away, it looks at the URL, picks up the Click ID, sends it in with the form, and then in the CRM, there's a certain field that has that Click ID. If there is one, of course, if there is one, it's there now, and that's carried all the way until the sale eventually or whatnot, and then gets past your ad account, so that you could see exactly what traits that user had that it initially, so that refine your ads. For e-commerce, anyone selling anything over $100, like I said, well, and just to reaffirm here, is taking a double-digit hit on just not using this opportunity in general. So I just wanted to basically say here, more like 2 to 3 at times hit. The people that are doing lead generation, if you're a big enough company, you already know you need CRMs, and you should be, though, using the CRM, both calls and the form fields, to pick up the click ID from your people as they initially come in, to then have it piped into your ad account. Most e-commerce companies aren't using a CRM, but ultimately should, because they can do this. They can have the same kind of gains, and it's a little trickier to get of course, everything synced up. But I gave you the system, so don't exclude yourself if you're not just typically doing lead generation, because the phone is very important, and you need to pick up the data from when people initially ask questions. So take that data when they eventually buy and feed it into your account, and or just pretty much leave it at that. But anyway, you get the general idea here of what's going on. Now I've got three case studies here that I'll explain what kind of results they got doing this, and to give you an idea of what can be possible for your own market. If you're wondering, like, I don't know if this will work for my market. We had in the glass repair space a company who isn't doing this, where they weren't picking up the Google Click ID. They were for just the form in this case. I explained everything that I explained here to them. Like, the phone calls are the most important, and so it is possible to pick up the Click ID from somebody when they call and get that into the CRM, which they were using Zoho CRM. And once they started getting that data into their CRM, in which their Zoho, because Zoho has a direct integration with Google, they started using that. They got another 147% increase in the amount of profit their overall ad spend could make, or did make, I should say. So the main thing with that is there's certain, like I said before, so for glass repair, there's all kinds of different sizes of customers. So just knowing that they bought or called is very, small potatoes compared to knowing the types of keywords people type in that have the really monster type of jobs. Okay? And if you don't have that, that's why you can lose 2 to 3x amount of half to 2/3, if you will, of your profit, not knowing that information, optimizing and running your ads for a long period of time. So that's the reason why that one had such a big jump. If we would have went from if we would have added in form tracking, as well, though it would have been over 147%, I could tell you that. But anyway, just when you're talking about the phone data itself, if you're not doing it now, possibly doing form tracking of grabbing that, click ID, using a hidden form field in your form, you could see what's going on. As a side thing, if you have a landing page and you think you're picking up data on your landing page, 10% of people from landing pages will go and venture to other pages on the site for lead generation companies or people doing lead generation. If you're doing e-commerce, it's more like 30-40%. And so you're not going to want to just track the form lead and the call lead on the landing page. You're going to want to track the entire site. So if they click to go to another page, you still got the data. More data, like I said, the better your results are going to be, the better your lift is going to be. Which I do by default every time. For the next company here is a CNC equipment company. So in this particular case, basically, if you sell something like that, industrial equipment, or other, this could be applied to many different product categories. Somebody comes in, they're looking for a CNC machine. They don't quite know what they need yet. They're not a product expert. They usually, let's say a good chunk of the time, I don't know exactly how much, they call, and what they were initially interested in isn't what they end up with, because the technical sales advisor asks questions and ultimately figures out they should be somewhere else. Whether that they help them come to the realization for that. And so, respectively, kind of with that, there's certain people with, XYZ budgets and then, lower budgets. Knowing which people in general, the type of traits that they have, age demographics, which is big there, gender demographic, and states that they're from. Getting that data so that you can totally max that part of your account out from when they call, having that data. And because a lot of times they don't make a decision right away because it's an expensive product, sometimes they'll wait a year to buy. That made a world of difference long term. We're talking, long term they'll benefit from this. You'll make more money for years and years, obviously, with this system in place, and technically it'll keep making you more money. After 12 months already, they increased the amount of profit from that same ad spend 228% is where I checked at the 12-month point. The glass repair place was more like 6 months already, because they had a high volume campaign already running, didn't need that much data. Sometimes you'll need 12 months data to make a big impact. Sometimes you'll need 18 months data, by the way. Just depends. Respectively, if you have, over 100 sales that came in which you have the click ID for, because you've set this whole system up, that's the time you could start to get decent returns. Once you have over 200 or 300, really, that'll work pretty much all the time to make your revisions to get this kind of jump. But respectively, the higher your product or service is in terms of cost, the longer which they'll come back. So the phone call, because it captures the data, and of course the form fill captures the data right away. When they eventually buy, because you're using a CRM, you'll be able to pick that up real well. But obviously, there's a lot of people that wait longer than 90 days to buy. We would lose some of those people. But even with that, if that's you, that's okay. You're still getting at least as much as you can for people up to 90 days that would buy. 1 to 90 days they end up buying. We still have the data on those people. The last example here is an environmental consulting company. This is the type of company that you're doing construction and you need to do testing of the soil before that you're going to build a building there, so that you know that the land is cleared for contaminants and whatnot. Also testing groundwater. This is a legal requirement. You don't want to build the building and then realize the land was toxic and then you have to tear everything down. That's why those regulations exist and why things are the way they are. So if you're going to build, you need this every time, essentially. basically, or just say yes for sure, at least in the U.S. Respectively, there in that particular market, obviously, I'm kind of repeating myself in terms of why this stuff works, but the difference between somebody who, there's some people who just get the test and that's it. There's some people who get the test and their stuff's contaminated and it turns into a $250,000 remediation job. Knowing what are the type of things that they search for, one, but two, there's certain areas obviously that have bigger problems than others. Some people have radon problems. Some people have, like the PCB problem. And it's not random. There's pockets where there's bigger problems. And so if you have this system set up, if you didn't know where it was, you'll find out where it is. And even if you think you're smart, you can be more granular in general with your ad account, and more specifically, you'll be able to. It's not usually one thing that gets you really good results. You could find out in this zip code, this actually worked really good. But when we paired it with the fact that they were on, a desktop device, and we paired it with the person being at least 35 years old, bang, 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 the results are massive. And you won't find out what all those things are or what combinations until you get that data and you can use it. And there's just stuff that you can't, you'll never be able to figure it out better than the data will tell you that what you should do. And so, like I was touching on before, it's not about shutting off or turning on things. You are trying to figure out what's a 35 to 45-year-old age bracket lead worth versus 45 to 55, and what's 55 plus worth versus 20 to 35. And you may think you're smart. Oh, nobody under 35 will buy, but so does everybody else. And so the traffic's cheaper for that. Okay, well, there's a value to that younger age demographic to you. Maybe it's only 20% of what people 55 plus age bracket is worth to you. But whereas your competition will just say exclude all those younger people, because you got this system set up, you'll pick up those extra people knowing that they're only worth 20% what you pay to get a click than the older people. And now you've got, because nobody wants those, an extra 30% or customers or leads that you could have got otherwise if you didn't have the data that told you what it was worth. And because you didn't really know and you were scared, you just shut it off and didn't you're looking to, in other words, value every possible consumer in your market that searches and get as many of them as you can at the cost in which it does not exceed the amount of ROI that you need to be where you're going to start losing money. And so if you do it with all the data involved, you can get the maximum customers that are not going to be, without having each customer obviously also be over the ROI or margin that you need to be profitable. So you're going to, in other words, make the most money that way because you know how to dial things exactly to get basically every little bit of value out of every possible opportunity in your market. And so when you're going to get somebody who isn't doing that, basically they're only going to be able to pay so much per click before they know it's not worth it. You technically can pay twice as much. Why? Because when they're on a mobile device, at least in those cases, you can only pay 30% the click cost or bid than on a desktop device. And then when your competition doesn't do that, you get customers that you're getting all the customers and taking all the customers away from the people that are the most valuable. So they're like, oh, I can't get these good customers anymore. What's going on? And then in exchange of that, the people that are way less valuable, that they don't know, you're just saying, here, take them all, take them all, take them all. And then they're getting hit from both angles there. So whereas you're 2 or 3x, you're getting 2 to 3 times as much profit now because you're able to go there and precisely set up your bids based upon what's producing a 6-to-1 ROI or 8-to-1 ROI in terms of sales revenue to ad spend there. They are now getting less efficient, which is, this should be, if you hate your competitors, this should be great for your way to get back at them, if you will. Maybe eventually it'll just knock them out. They'll just say this isn't profitable anymore. And so what you do is you have that data fed in, and then for each age demographic, time of the day of the week, device, state, zip code, income level, parental status, it goes on. You can see exactly what the value in terms of revenue divided by ad spend, or in other words, the ROI was for each one of those. And then you can use what do they call a bid modification formula to decide exactly if I need an 8-to-1 return here, or in general, the way that I do it is this particular age demographic here getting me above average or below average returns here. If it's producing above average, I'm going to go up a certain percentage in which its potential is over the average. And if it's below average, I'm going to decrease my bid for that specific age demographic in which it is worse than the average. What does that do? It takes away budget from the part of the account that's producing less than average and puts it towards the part of the account that's producing above average. And so you automatically will get a higher ROI from the same ad spend. That's why you get the 2 to 3 times X increase in profit from your campaigns. And naturally, the better data you have, the better you could do that, the more you're going to make. Eventually, you'll have so much data, you can't get any more out of it, but you've already made 2 to 3 times much more money from the same exact ad spend you had before, in which you can grab out of the market because you know right where to scoop the customers out at, and everybody else, they're getting less profitable because they were unaware that you had certain people marked as not valuable or less valuable, and you just gave them to them, and then they are now spending their money to get half as many dollars back from it. Respectively, and to going kind of full circle on this, the reason why you're willing to pay $2 a click for somebody who's 35 versus $4 a click for somebody that's 40 years old, let's say, when you go upwards and bid, the reason why you're able to actually get more clicks, it's not an on or off system. They have a thing called search impression share. Google has, even though there's 4 ads at the top of Google that you see when you search for certain things within your market, there's really 20 people cycled in and out, and Google's constantly trying to figure out who they want to show that provides the best experience and gets the highest amount of conversions per impression. You can look up impression. So they could promote those ads first. Why? Because they want the people that provide the best experience, that get to help the user the quickest at the highest rate, so people in the future want to click on ads. You see that? So it builds up the value of the ads so that people over time click less on organic. That's their top goal. It isn't just making money. So but still also fundamentally a bidding system to some degree. You could promote crap. They'll just charge you 10 times as much as the average person who does it the best. You could think about it that way. So when you understand that somebody that's 40 versus 30 is twice as valuable, you can double your bid for the 40 category. And instead of before you were getting shown like 50% of the time, now you're getting shown like 80% of the time. So you're basically just scooping up more of the 40-year-olds, and you know you can because you're producing twice as much ROI on the 40-year-old, and in which you know you only need this much margin to be profitable. So you'll make more money doubling down and getting 3 times as much traffic from this keyword than to simply say, oh, I'm getting a better return from this particular search, good enough. You'll make more overall profit by doubling and tripling, quadrupling down on the parts that are producing above average returns, in which exceed your margin requirements, than simply having the same bidding strategy for everything, because you'll get shown a much higher percentage of the time if you do a good job, but also you are willing to bid more to get shown closer to 100% of the time for those particular opportunities. Respectively, Google will promote you even harder when you bid. So whereas with everything equal, if you bid more, instead of Google just promoting you that much more, because if you already are bidding more on something that you know in general has more value to that audience in terms of getting what they want quicker, you'll not just get a little bit of more gain, you'll get a lot more gain. So you'll have more just leverage on getting more traffic from those certain people, because you're spending more, but also because you're spending more on something that Google already has, what they have seen, better stats on serving that select part of the customer or market. So you'll get an even bigger gain than what proportionally you tell Google you're willing to spend more for that particular class of people. Obviously, that's not an absolute, because ultimately, obviously, if something's more profitable in terms of getting you more revenue per click, Google will probably want to promote you more for that anyway. But it's not a guarantee per se that Google sees it. But on the whole, you could assume they will. And so you'll be able to know where to bid more to get more. But on top of it, you'll get even more, way more clicks, or explosive amount more clicks, just a little bit more in spend, because that's an area where Google already sees you able to positively serve your market at. You get a lot more clicks. And that's why overall, or a good chunk of the reason why 2 to 3x increase in ROI will come from when you use this system and you actually go through all these steps I gave you. So, but it all starts with, having the data come in for you to be able to use it, running your ads for a while, maybe 3, 6, maybe 12 months, like I said. Then once you have the data, then you're ready to get that 2 to 3x increase in profit, baby. You might start out with a 2x. It might take you 18 months to get to 3x. But this is very typical stuff, so that you ultimately, on where your best customers are coming from, you're not just getting 20% market share or 50% market share there. Now you're getting 100% market share there, and you're absolutely milking all the opportunities that you really want for everything, and get every single possible one you can, because you know exactly where they are, and exactly what you could pay, i.e. you could pay a little bit more to not get half, but all of them. And taking the money for that from stuff that just simply wasn't statistically worth spending what you were ultimately spending on that. So you want to have a CRM for your business if you're running good money on PPC, whether e-commerce or not e-commerce. You want your shopping cart data feeding in if you have it, your phone call data feeding in, your form data coming in. You want to link your CRM to your ad accounts, whether Google, Facebook, or Bing. They all let you do it. You're going to be the king in your market, brushing off and letting your competition, without even knowing it, get the crappier traffic over time during that 6, 12, 18 month period that you set this up and do this. Whereas you're going to get and take, because you're willing to bid a little bit more now, because you know you can, for the best customers, and take them away from all your competition. So anyway, that's everything in a nutshell, how to actually link the PPC calls that you get, or calls from PPC to your CRM systems, why you want to do it, and how, basically, which getting it into your ad account to 2 or 3x the profitability of your ads in the same exact ad spend you have right now. If you like this video, I have a lot of other PPC money-making strategy videos on this channel. If you want to make a lot of money with PPC, you should check my other videos out. I also have a blog at guaranteedppc.com/blog, which has step-by-step instructions on how to build campaigns the exact way that I build them to guarantee our clients results. If you like things done in a little bit more step-by-step fashion, you can find information there. Maybe that'll be useful to you. If you have any questions about anything to do with the getting call data properly fed into your account, I do this all the time, or things that you think I should have covered and didn't, leave me a comment down below. I get back to every single person who leaves me a comment on this channel within a day or two time personally. So with that, hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you on the next one.